Welcome to this week's What's the Tea? This is a conversation series between four Press House staff, me, Otto Abrahams, Becca Bedell, Erica Liu, and Ginger Morgan, when we sit down to discuss current events, social and political issues, and the tough topics we might like to avoid. 30 minutes, no script. We're here not as experts, but human beings. So today's topic is winners and losers. We are starting today's live stream with our ritual. So let's check in and see what everybody's drinking. That may be a dangerous question the day after election. What is everybody drinking today?
I am so excited to share with you that in my Press House mug, you will find candy corn. I'm just eating the greatest candy on God's green earth.
Oh my God,
right.
Nate.
So wrong. So wrong.
Can't top that.
I'm just going to call it sugar tea.
I have my Barriques mug with a Tazo brand refreshment peppermint spearmint blend of tea.
Oh, nice.
Herbal decaf.
I will keep on the Tazo theme. I have an iced passion tea in my jar mug.
We're so fancy.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's a good glass of water because I'm trying to practice good self-care this week and drink water, move, try to sleep. So
Press House Church versus apartments. Candy corn and water. Two extremes
Me out,
versus
right?
tea.
I got to balance his candy corn, problem.
It's not a problem. It is grace. It is grace.
Well, listen, we chose this topic, winners and losers, when we knew we would be in the midst of an election week and we might or might not know the outcome. And as it turns out, we don't have a clear sense of the outcome. And we thought in a way, democratic elections bring up for every person in the society who's voting a sense that your people, your vote can win or lose. And rather than sort of fixate on the things that are currently on the 24/7 news cycle, I thought we thought as a group, actually, it might be illustrative to start with talking about what were we like as kids growing up when we were playing games or competing for something. What was our style of being a winner or a loser?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the interesting thing about this intentionally thorny and provocative title and topic is that we don't frame it, like a lot of us don't frame winning and losing in that sort of harsh terms that often in our adult lives of like, I'm a winner or I'm a loser, like to actually identify yourself with that noun. But then thinking back to when I was a kid, it's just like everything felt that way. Like I'm gonna say I was a bit of a sore loser, in part because my older brother set the tone of being extremely competitive. Like I love him to death, but wow, like the two of us learned very early on that like we would get all excited about like designing board games together that then we never played because we couldn't do it without just like tearing up the game board we had just created or like tearing up the score sheet we had just created. All of the creative energy, but all of the competitiveness. And I do think I've tamped that down over the course of my life significantly. Yeah. It was rough.
On a similar note, I too share that hyper competitive nature, as my colleagues at Press House know. I think that might have been like one of the first things that ever happened in the staff meeting. We were playing a game and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beat all of them.
I was like, we don't need to keep score. And Nee was like, I'm keeping score already.
Yeah. And I was joking right before this that like I don't remember, I've never lost anything in my life. But like honestly, when I think back to what I was like as a kid in terms of winning and losing, at least there's two things I would say. One, in my adult mind, I have very effectively edited out most of my memories of losing things. And like there was a lot of things that I could have lost because like I played soccer growing up and like I was in like academic quiz bowls and stuff like that. Like lots of things that I could have lost. I just like in my mind have sequestered those memories away. But I do know, because I have this one memory of when I was a kid, like a really little kid, we were playing some game in the neighborhood and I lost some sort of inconsequential thing that we were doing. And I just like went straight home crying my eyes out, telling my mom, like, they hurt my feelings. Like we had just lost, like no one hurt my feelings, but it was like heartbreaking for me. I did not handle losing well, which is probably why I've written away all of those memories.
I was growing up the youngest in a pack of like sibling cousins that got together. My older brother and then my two cousins who were also both guys. And I was the youngest, so I was always the bottom of the totem pole. And whenever we would play group games, the next cousin, my cousin who was older than me by a year, always got stuck with me because he was second on the totem pole, or second on the bottom in terms of being in charge. And I'm just realizing that I used that term that I shouldn't have, so apologies. And so I actually got used to always losing. Like I didn't realize, because I was the youngest until I got a little older, that they had rigged it so that no matter what, I was always going to lose. Like they like to play Miami Vice, and somehow whenever that, which is basically like guns and robbers shooting, and no matter what, I always died first. Always. It didn't matter. It just was like, Erica's dead. Like even before like the game has started, it was like I was dead. And so I don't think, I never liked it, but I got used to it. Like I just knew that I was always going to lose. And so I learned not to like, it's just like, that's the way it is. But I will say that there were times when I would unexpectedly win something. And when I did, it was such a surprise that I didn't really even know what to say or do with myself. And so it was kind of uncomfortable. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then I would move on, not really knowing what to do with it because it was just so unexpected.
Well, it's interesting how much being the youngest in a family, like I'm the youngest of 4. And as far as I know, I'm the most competitive one of the 4. It would be really interesting to ask my sisters what they think. They would also say I was a terrible loser, like sore loser, because I was so competitive. And in the rest of my life with my peers, I have more like Nee's experience of mostly I remember winning. Like I was one of the captains. I always got to choose the other kids. There were other kids that were like I wasn't the fastest runner, so I know I didn't win those races. But I was generally had a sense that I was successful competing, except with my sisters. I could never, it was sort of like Erica's experience. I could never win because I was the youngest and couldn't keep up, they would rig the rules, whatever it was. And it was sort of, I think, their way of trying to teach me, like my dad's style of competing was watching the rules. Like he was a rule watcher and nothing was more important than abiding by the rules. And so I have this weird, like hypervigilance about rules. And and, you know, Midwestern, nice, like how you're supposed to lose is to be very gracious and to be very kind. If you're a winner, you're supposed to be gracious. If you're a loser, you're supposed to concede. There are etiquette around these things. Like, so I have this like Midwestern cultural thing, and it always worked against how competitive I really was. Like, it was bad form to actually be as competitive as I was.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about that, realizing the similarity in sibling relationship. My brother, for most of my childhood, was bigger than me, like significantly bigger than me. And I would often try to fight him. And he would do this thing where he would just like, he was lay back and put his feet up on the couch so that I couldn't actually reach him. And I just would lose it. Like, talk about being a sore loser. I was bad. I couldn't handle it. Because in my mind, I was like, I have to win. And I couldn't beat him.
Yeah, I feel that. My brother is 3.5 years older, and I will say I do think he was more competitive like at heart than I was. But whenever it was that I was trying to like get at him in like a duel with our plastic lightsabers or whatever, and he had hit his growth spurt and I hadn't, and so he just reaches out and holds me at arm's length, and I'm like swinging and I can't get him, and he's just like, the shame, just the burned pride of it. I'm
really curious about like how we all internalized messages about whether we were supposed to be competitive or how we were supposed to win or lose, because it comes into play with our expectations of other people who may or may not share our view of how to win and lose.
I will say that because I was always used to being in that position of losing, I have always kind of been irked by people when they win shoving it in my face. And so I have this clear memory of a Thanksgiving gathering with family, actually a different set of cousins. And they had a free spirit of just win and be, live and winning a game of Taboo. I remember it being that game, and I remember everyone seemed to be having a good time, and I actually was doing fine, but I was not having a good time because of the way the competitiveness played out. And I think, some of it was play, gloating, strutting, whatnot, but I was so uncomfortable by it. And so I have this in a sense of downplaying, and I think about that in stereotypes actually of women and people who are, if you're successful, you're supposed to downplay and not strut, but it being okay in other contexts for other people to not do that. And I don't have a conclusion about that, but I know it shaped me and the way I move about it and my expectations of myself and of others, unfairly or not, of what I think is appropriate behavior around success even, right? Or to be proud of something or anything like that. Like, I have some weird feelings around it because I'm not sure what to do, I think, given my formative experiences of when I have been on the other end of it and remembering how people my older cousins and brother would rub it in my face.
Yeah, what you're saying about sort of expectations around behavior when it comes to winning and losing is interesting. I'm thinking a little bit more now about, and I think what I'm about to say is probably in many ways connected to my experience as a man and like what it means to be a man in Midwestern culture. But for me, like winning and losing was often about in my mind, just my own level of preparation. So it's like, if I just am like prepared enough and then I execute well, I will win. And then if I do win, it's not because like, why would I gloat about it? It's just who I am. I am a winner. And if I lose, I'm like, I have to sort of project a sense of like kind of brushing it off, like, it's fine. But internally, it's deeply unsettling because it, again, like affects this image I have of myself as like, I am a winner. If I do X, Y, and Z, I will win. And I'm thinking now about how that plays out in all sorts of various aspects of my life. Like, even when it comes to something as simple as playing a board game, I'm someone who like loves to like talk trash during board games. But if I then do win the eventual board game, I don't feel like I can gloat because in my head, I'm like, well, of course I won. So, and it can get more serious than that, but I'll keep that as.
It took me a long time to adjust to my in-laws' family's style of playing games. And I don't know for any people who are partnered or married or whatever, but there was a lot of table talk and trash talk and smack talk. And that was really different than, and it was, I think, intended to be playful, but it struck me as almost mean. And so I had a really hard time like not reacting personally to that or feeling really defensive for on other people's behalf or all this weird caretaking and and I don't know if that was like Midwestern or female or both, to learn to sort of smack talk better. I certainly smack talk some in sports, but not at like family board games. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess what I'm just turning over in my mind is like how much I've grown since I was that like screaming fourth grader swinging a lightsaber. Like and coming out has been a huge part of it because I do think like different genders are socialized in different ways around winning and losing, but I feel like I have just tried very hard to internalize humility and to whether I win or lose in a board game or something like, if my candidate wins or loses in a political election, like to then immediately try and find something to appreciate on both sides, something to appreciate in like the way that I played my game and the way that my partner played the game that we both just ended in a very close race. And as long as we both had a good time, like, okay, that's what there is to celebrate. Or like, yeah, I don't think it doesn't come naturally to me to gloat, that's for sure. But I think that that's certainly my instinct now, is to, especially with things that feel higher stakes like elections, it feels wrong to me to use a victory or a defeat as an opportunity to deepen the divide, and rather like I want to use it as an opportunity to reach out and say like, okay, like the results are in, but here's what there is to appreciate. Because I think in the time leading up to a decision in whatever, but especially in something like a presidential election, in the time leading up to the decision, everything gets more and more and more polarized. And so if you don't take the opportunity to undo some of that in the time afterwards, it just feels like it gets really dangerous. Yeah, and I do think it gets dangerous, especially if people really start to internalize identifying as a winner or a loser, rather than, because it's grammatically very different to say I am a winner than the person I voted for won. So I know we're all sort of sitting with that.
Right. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about democracy and the way that democracy requires a capacity to lose. Like, you know, dictatorships and fascism mitigate against ever losing, right? Sort of ginning up the game so that you win. And whatever side you're on of the elections, people want to feel like, and games you play, you want to feel like it's fair. And if it's fair, then you feel like you can concede, or this time you didn't win, or whatever. And I think it's one of the things, like, we've had contested elections. We've had elections that felt like, was this fair? Was this done right? People have, you know, gone through recounts and those kinds of things. So that in and of itself is not distressing to me. I'm very curious about how we'll move through this moment when there are the sense out in our American society, whether or not this election was fair, whether it was right, and whether or not at the top, people will be able to concede. And I don't know the outcome, so I don't know who that's going to be. I mean, 4 years ago, it took a while for there to be a conceding, you know, concession. So it's really interesting to me. And on the same token, I think there are certain things you shouldn't concede. And so how we as a society, like, how do you judge when you stand against things that feel unfair or rigged or wrong, and when you let democracy be the guiding value, you know? But it's just on my mind that democracy doesn't work if you can't lose.
Yeah, and I don't know. What I'm about to say could potentially go into the weeds, and I'll try to not go all the way down in there, but like, I don't know whether this election in particular is different than other ones insofar as like the way normal everyday people feel like this election will result in them either winning or losing. Like, in my mind, we have lost either way. Whatever happens as a result of the election, like, we have lost. We've been losing for a long time, with all of the problems that we have seen kind of playing out in public. Like, no one is winning. And so it's just so interesting to me in this moment, like the way I see people like that I grew up with, and even friends that I have now, like this sense that if a particular candidate wins or loses, they themselves have won or lost. And if maybe it's just me personally struggling to understand that level of identification with a political candidate, but in this moment, I'm just like, I can't even think in terms of winning and losing, because we lost a long time ago. And like, I don't want to play that game anymore. Like, I want to play a different game with different rules and different players. Like, just forget all about them. But we're stuck in this one. And it's a challenge to figure out how to navigate this landscape that tries at every turn, literally every turn, someone is trying to tell you to think about this election in terms of, are you going to win or are you going to lose? And it's hard to resist that narrative.
Right, because it makes it personal in a way that then individual people can turn against each other much more easily if they see themselves as, I'm the winner and you're the loser. Yeah, God, it's fascinating. it raises for me the question of, okay, when we feel like we're identifying as a winner or a loser, try and drill down into that, and what is it actually that we are winning or losing? Because I'm wrestling with that myself, like the feeling of, I feel like the media narratives around just how high stakes things feel in 2020 makes me feel like I am either winning or losing in this very drastic way. But then I remember, oh, like a lot of what's going on in my life and a lot of the things in my life will not necessarily be changed either way, for better and for worse. Like, anyway.
I think that is at the core when we, there's a line and you're never sure quite when it gets crossed when you're playing together, and that sense of competitiveness is fun and generative. And when it crosses that line into othering, into a very much of like, and now in our very primal instinct, we're, you are the other, and I must, hate you, despise you, and outcast you. Games can be like, I mean, I have kids, and watching my kids like that, like they're having fun, and it derails all of a sudden into a wreck. And I think I've experienced that too. It's fun until it's not, right?
Right. It's fun until it's not fun anymore, right?
What are those conditions that, I mean, clearly our country is in the way it's been derailed, right? There is that sense that we have all lost when we can't talk to our own neighbors, when we can't see each other, any kind of commonality, when we feel the need that we're going to have to cut people off. Like, we've all lost. How do we get out of that when we just say that paradigm sucks and I don't want to use that one anymore, because winners and losers means that everyone loses. When can we play, and when can you play a game and play hard and really play so hard and lose and still feel like that was a good game and worthwhile? Yeah, I want to play that game too.
Well, on that note, we have run through our 30 minutes, and very much appreciate each of you who are here to be good conversation partners, and the folks who are listening. Hope it's generated some interesting things for you to think about. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with our next episode of What's the Tea?